My name is Patrick Ryan, and just like the gentleman sitting right next to me on the right, I am also a salesperson. I work for a company called Cloud Academy. There is my email, there is my phone number. So, again, I am a salesperson who's at Cloud Academy, and you know, one of the benefits of my job is that I get to speak to folks like you every day. I'm talking to engineers all the time about exactly the things that we were introducing ourselves today. You know, how much are you using AWS within your company? What is the strategy? And I'm fortunate to work with some experts in this field. Many of the trainers that we have all 5 certifications. I know Andrew on the right-hand side would probably have all 5. I don't think Stuart has all 5 right now, but there's another gentleman who we'll probably reference today that has all of them. Quick question, I know one of the gentlemen over there says he has 3 certifications today, all 3 associates. Congratulations, man, that's just totally awesome. Anybody else in here certified? Which one do you have? Developer, okay. So I think that's probably the toughest one, next to SysOps. Associate level, right? And then the developer and SysOps together would be the professional one. And you know, I think you'll get the picture here as I move through that these things are not easy. Okay. So the one question I would have for everybody in the room here is, what do all of these companies have in common? And the short, quick answer is that they've all committed to the cloud and somewhat on a grand scale. So I think maybe the largest number we heard today in the room was that 50% of your environment might be in the AWS cloud today. For many of these companies, it's much more. And the one company I would like to highlight is Capital One. Capital One is a large customer of Cloud Academy. They have thousands and thousands of licenses from us, and they are fully committed to the cloud. And I think this is important because look at the business they're in. Financial services, credit cards, traditionally a business that was cloud adverse. Everything was run on premise. People that would work at these financial institutions would say, hey, I'm a better security person than anyone at AWS. And then Capital One throws it all in. And right now, it's amazing what they're doing. You know, they write their own applications that integrate with AWS and actually sell those applications to other financial services companies in the market. So certainly a pioneer when it comes to moving to the cloud.
And they invest in open source.
Pardon?
And they invest in open source.
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, we all come to these meetups with an agenda of some sort, right? Some of us are here to learn, some of us are here to find another job. You know, ultimately I said, hey, my goal here is not to sell you anything. What I would like to see happen is for you to achieve one of your certifications or a couple certifications, go get a job at one of these companies, and then tell your boss, hey, I used Cloud Academy to learn cloud computing to become a master. And, you know, ultimately, you know, we're looking to work with companies like this on a grand scale. Okay, so we didn't see any local companies up there, but I wanted to throw a slide up here about a story that happened back in 2010. Some of you may remember this. This was in the very early days of the cloud, and this was one of the top 10 stories that was searched on a website called searchcloudcomputing.com. And the gist of it is, AWS poster child Eli Lilly has walked away from the cloud computing service after failing to come to terms over legal indemnification issues. Sources close to Lilly say the pharmaceutical giant was at wit's end trying to negotiate a contract with AWS that would push some accountability for network outages, security breaches, and other forms of risk inherent to the cloud. So do you remember when in 2010 it was always inherent risks to the cloud? And at the time, I remember I was selling a private cloud file sharing solution. And a little bit after 2010, and I remember calling customers saying, you know, this Amazon thing, you got to be really careful. It's the public cloud. I mean, anything can happen out there. And I quickly learned after people would laugh at me on the phone and say, no, if you're selling on-premise private cloud solutions, you're behind the times. It's not the way the world is going. And we would talk about these, inherent risks in the cloud that maybe existed, maybe not, I don't know. But I don't think today it's even an issue, right? And from the AWS CTO, for those following this anonymous source, Eli Lilly is still very much a customer, so it looks like this searchcloudcomputing.com was trying to drive traffic to their website, right? But what this does bring up is an interesting slide, and I want to believe that I saw this slide here first at the IndyAWS group from the healthcare gentlemen that were presenting at the last meeting. And I think this is really interesting. I mean, I really think you can learn a lot here about how this is all set up and what your responsibility is and what is the responsibility of AWS. So I think it goes without saying that you're going to be responsible for your own content, right? What you put in there, you're responsible for what happens to it. The platform application, identity and access management, IAM, things that you're going to be responsible for. AWS is also responsible for identity access management on a certain level too, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But you can imagine the availability zones, the regions, availability zones, edge locations. We'll get into that a little bit more later, but those kind of deal with the physical infrastructure that AWS is providing, okay? Let's talk a little bit about that same slide, but more in terms of EC2. So the virtual machines that you're creating within AWS for your users. So when it comes to EC2, you're responsible for your own IAM, identity access management. But think about it from the AWS level. They have a bunch of different companies that are part of their cloud. And all these companies are creating EC2 instances. Well, they can't get that mixed up, right? From a very high level, they need to make sure that your environment is separate from other customers' environments. So they have a responsibility at their level, but you also have a responsibility at your level of creating environments and making sure that your employees or your users are accessing what they should access and not accessing what they shouldn't be accessing. Okay? So let's talk about certifications and I think why it's relevant to the people in this room, especially the ones who said that they're looking for their next opportunity. This is a recent snapshot from Indeed.com, which is a job posting service. And if we look at 2016, we're going to see at any one time when you tag AWS certifications that you're going to have 550 job openings. I mean, if you go back to 2015, just a year ago, you're at 300. So it's almost half. Do you need any more validation that this is the way the world is going? These certifications, we'll get into some salaries here in just a moment, but there's no doubt that they're worth something. And everyone that I've talked to that has taken the certification test tell me they're very hard. A lot of people don't pass it on their first try. A lot of people don't pass it on their second try. So people who do hold these pieces of paper, there's something to be said for that. You really know your information, and chances are you've put in time to study, but more importantly, you've taken the time to work within Amazon, to work within AWS. Maybe you do it at your job, maybe you do it on your own at home, but you got to become familiar with it. So in terms of some salaries here, you'll see the Certified Solution Architect, the associate level, is $125,000. Now I actually have a slide that contradicts this and says it's $123,000. So it's a $2,000 difference. And actually the $125K would be for the professional level. Yes?
In terms of difficulty of the certification, do you find or do you know if the Amazon certifications are just that much more difficult than, say, the Cisco or the Microsoft or Red Hat certifications?
Yeah, I do believe that. There's no doubt. I also think the people that create the AWS tests are very smart people. It is their goal to trick you. And we'll have a couple examples of that coming up here, but let me get to that in just a moment here, Calvin. So, okay, so now we have Certified Solution Architect Associate. How many of those do you think exist in the world today? Associate level solution architects? Right? Who has a guess? How many are there today? 10,000. Okay, good guess. 105. How many? 105,000. Okay, so somewhere between 10,000 and 105,000, right? Okay. So, this is Arun's certification that he posted somewhere on the internet, and I found it. And you'll see that he is person number 32,001 to have passed the exam. See the certification number. This happened on February 24th, 2017. So about 3 months ago, we had 32,000 AWS solution architects at the associate level. Maybe it's 35,000 today. I don't know, right? This is 3 months ago. So that's how many out there. As you can imagine, for the other certification levels, it is much less than that. And I have some snapshots of some other certifications, and we'll pull those up here in a moment also. Okay. So here are the certification salaries for 2016 across the board. So you see the discrepancy. I was talking about the associate versus professional for solution architect. A $2,000 difference there. You know, I don't think that number actually represents the difficulty of the associate test versus the professional test. And, you know, again, there's just much fewer professionals out there than there are associates. But the big one here is the DevOps engineer, which again is kind of a combination of developer associate and SysOps administrator associate. And you really need to know your stuff. I'm going to present today a learning path and topics that you can study to get yourself to that level, but I won't be offering much content or learning material on the Certified DevOps Engineer. So what are the certification levels? Well, you'll see on the left we have the 3 associate certification levels, Certified Developer, Certified Solution Architect, and then Certified SysOps Administrator. For someone like myself who's been in the IT world, you know, for 15, 20 years now, I remember when operations and development were separate entities. And, you know, it's funny because when I talk to my engineering colleagues, I say, well, you know, why you know, have they brought these two together now? And I mean, it's pretty clear. You know, you have developers who are requesting compute resources from their infrastructure counterparts. And, you know, it's, whenever you try to read about this topic, it's always about the two sides playing nicely. And I guess that hasn't always been the case, right? There's been a lot of tension between the infrastructure folks and the development folks. And, you know, I think it's clear why. Amazon has done such a great job of bringing these two together, and you know, I don't know. I guess, you know, if you're a really good dev guy, you probably don't need an infrastructure guy to help you out. You know, but again, those are few and far between. So on the professional side, you have the certified DevOps professional, which is the engineer professional. And then solution architect professional, okay? So this is just kind of a different snapshot of the same exact slide. You know, on the architect is exactly what it is, exactly what it sounds. It's architecting the solutions. It's you know, creating the EC2s and making sure you have all the proper compute resources, whether it's CPU, whether it's storage, for your developers to work with, okay? So let's talk a little bit about the exam requirements. It's a sit-down test taken at a Criterion testing center. There's 2 of them in IndyAWS. I'll pull those up here in just a moment. The cost for an associate exam is $150. If you don't pass the test, there's a 14-day waiting period before you can retake the test. Each time you retake the test, it's going to cost you another $150. AWS certs need to be recertified every 2 years, but if during that time you take and pass a professional level exam, you don't need to recertify your associate level, which would make a lot of sense, I think.
If you pass another associate level exam, will that renew the ones you've already got?
No, it won't. So
Either professional will re-up any associate?
yeah. So well, I should say if your professional architect will re-up your associate architect. Your professional engineer will re-up your associate level sysops or associate level development. So where can you take the tests? These are where the Criterion facilities are located. In fact, there's 2 of them that are pretty close to here. And if you're like me and from northern Indiana, you would take the one in Hammond.
There's one downtown and then one over office. Looks like Fisher's.
Yeah, I think it's over that way. Okay, so the question formats. Like I said before, they're going to try to trick you. That's what this is all about. You really need to know your stuff here. Amazon will try to create, make up services that actually don't exist, and try to get you to provide an answer to a service that just doesn't exist. So you really need to read the content. You need to read the wording and understand what it is that they're trying to ask you. So you have multiple choice. There actually can be multiple answers to any given question. So it could be B and C, it could be B and D. You need to understand which ones are correct. And again, there could be multiple correct statements. If you get a question wrong, you won't know that. Okay, so they're not going to tell you what you got right. They're not going to tell you what you got wrong. It's a pass or fail test. Okay. And then read the statement or question, and from the response option, select only the option that represents the most correct or best answers given. Okay. He asked if it is multiple answers, do they tell you that? And the answer is yes, they do. I don't know if it's 100% of the time, though. But they'll say, select the options that best represent or best support this statement. And that could mean multiple answers. Yeah, or it could mean one, exactly.
Do you at least get a score?
You get your score. You get your score that same day. And a passing grade is, I believe, 70. At least it was recently. And
It varies per test.
oh, you're right, and it is graded on a curve. That is true, absolutely. So if you know it's one of these things, if you know your stuff, that's your best defense to passing this test. Okay? Okay, so let's see here. Let's do a sample question right now. Amazon CloudFront is, does anybody know the answer in here? B? Anyone else have one? B it is. So Amazon CloudFront is a content delivery service. The CloudFront service actually delivers from the edge locations. So when we get into the actual physical regions of the AWS service, you have regions. Within the regions, you have availability zones, and then you have something called edge locations. Edge locations deliver data in big cities like here in Indianapolis, right? So it's the ability to deliver content, deliver data a very short distance from where you're physically sitting, okay? And the idea is to reduce latency. Yes, sir.
So do they update the questions pretty often so that, because the service is updated so often, if they say like, how many IOPS do you get on an EBS volume of 100 gigs, I'm like, well, do you mean today or do you mean a year ago?
I think it's safe to say that all of the questions you're going to see during the test are all up to date and all relevant. So even at Cloud Academy, we have and use technology where if something changes within the Amazon documentation, we know about it immediately and we can update our sample questions right then and there. I hope, and I got to imagine that they have something similar too. Right?
I'm watching some training videos from another company, and they're a year and a half old, and so I'm a little concerned. I've already caught some things that aren't current.
Well, I can't wait for you to try out the free service from Cloud Academy and compare it. Yes, sir.
My experience is that once they create the test, they don't update it.
Interesting. That could be the case. I have not heard that, but again, I haven't taken the test. I'm preparing to take the solution architect test, but when I started studying for it, I realized how much I don't know. Yes, sir.
Just to add a bit of information, I've been studying for the associate exam as well from A Cloud Guru.
Gotcha.
And in their training, they actually tell you that the test may be outdated. And one perfect example, something I picked up on immediately, they were talking about message passing. It's actually in one of your slides. They talk about it now has first in, first out.
Yeah.
That was something that's brand new, but something to watch out. The test may still ask you a question and say, does message passing, does it have the ability to have first in, first out? So in fact, it does now, brand new, but the answer is no.
Hey, well, let me ask you then, because I wonder, how does A Cloud Guru know that they graded that answer wrong?
Well, they don't know that. What they tell you is that some of the questions will be outdated and they'll refer to some terms that are.
I see. Sure.
To kind of tell you, well that message passage was something I picked up on. That wasn't an A Cloud Guru. But they talk about, well, they may refer to it as this, but now it's known as this. So be prepared to hear both sides.
Yeah.
You know, so that's the kind of thing, and they do tell you that sometimes the answers are outdated. Because Amazon changes so much. And like I said, that message passing is one example that I just ran across. Because it's brand new. I mean, it used to not have first in, first out. And A Cloud Guru will tell you that your application has to deal with, you know, if it's first in, first out, then you need to make another queue for things that have higher priority. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so that's how you deal with first in, first out. That all your applications are going to go to that first queue, clear that out, then they go to the general queue. And that's how you kind of handle it. But brand new, when we go back 12 slides, it'll say first in, first out. You wonder, why is it saying first in, first out? Because it didn't have it. It's brand new. So is the test going to...
Yeah, that tape.
That is a message passing question. They'll ask you about first in, first out.
Do so well in all the questions that haven't changed.
There you go.
Okay, so the exam is tough. You need to study, you need to prepare, and what can you do to do that? Well, here at Cloud Academy, we do have a formula. Again, there's other folks out there that provide similar content in helping people study. But there's courses, right? And courses are very important. You need to watch the videos. The great thing about Cloud Academy is that you can slow the video down if it's something that it's a topic that you think you need extra help on, or if it's something that you think you already understand, you can speed the video up. But videos are important, I think, for everybody. What I think is more important is hands-on labs. So part of the service that we offer is the ability to go into Amazon using Cloud Academy credentials, which is nice because you can create environments, create snapshots, do things like that, and know that when you leave your computer, all of that stuff will turn off and erase on its own. You won't be responsible for making sure you shut everything down. Quizzes. Listen, again, you go out there and find a lot of services that are going to provide you sample questions on the tests. And that's something that we do, have over 2,000 of them. We hire people to write questions for the quizzes or for the tests, for the quizzes, because as you probably know, you can't go in there and take a picture of them. You can't talk about any of the questions that were on the tests. You sign an agreement or click on a click wrap agreement while you're taking the test that prevents you from doing that.
But somehow they're always on that.
Yeah.
There's companies guarantee every certificate, like IBM, Cisco, there's an exam out there with the exact same questions, and they would guarantee that you pass. I think they're coming from India.
Yeah, right.
Because they have nearly the same security level.
So you need to do the labs. You know, this was something that was eye-opening for me when I first started learning about AWS. you know, creating your first EC2 instance with Linux or with Windows, creating an S3 bucket for your first time, whatever that might be. You know, Amazon does it a little different than the way things were always done before. So you need to do a lab, or you need to sign up for your own account. Everybody can sign up for a free AWS account, but like I was saying before, they're going to ask you during that sign-up process for a credit card. So although there's a lot of free things that you can do within AWS, there's things that eventually they're going to charge you for, and if you're not careful, you could actually get charged money. You can use services like CloudWatch that'll help you monitor what you've actually created. It'll help you monitor your costs and make sure that you're within budget.
One of those things on that, one thing, elastic load balancing will cost you money from day one.
Okay.
So I have a 6-cent bill from last month. That's almost it. They say, okay, send it up quickly, get rid of it. Because it will cost you money from day one.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the solution architect. I'm glad that we have some folks in here. Please add your input. You've taken the test. You've passed the test. Has anyone taken the test and failed it? Yeah, right. I know I would fail it the first time. Okay, so what can you expect on the solution architect exam? Well, 60% of the examination is going to be around designing highly available, cost-efficient, fault-tolerant, and scalable systems. Okay, you know, think about the architect and creating the VMs or the computers, the EC2 instances that your developers are going to need or that you're going to need. Okay, so it's the solution architect. The majority of the test is about designing. 10% of that is implementation and deployment. 20% of that is data security, which I learned very quickly is where I fall short personally. And then finally, 10% of that is troubleshooting. Okay. So there's a lot of topics. In fact, there's really not much time left, so I'm going to go through much of the technical information here. Maybe we'll touch on designing highly available, cost-efficient solutions, but we probably won't even get to data security. So the content may include the following of what you need to know. How to design cloud services, elasticity and scalability. So elastic load balancer, a very popular feature within AWS that you need to become very familiar with. Planning and design, and then finally monitoring. So you need to be familiar with the best practices, developing to client specifications. You know, there's a lot of questions around controlling your costs in AWS. For a company that's selling you something, there's a lot you need to know about how not to pay them, right? And that's interesting. I mean, they understand also that things can probably get out of hand when you're creating stuff, and they want people who know what to expect with that. You need to know a lot about your recovery time objective and your recovery point objective when designing your disaster recovery strategy. I think this is important because, you know, it's a little bit different than configuring systems in an on-premise world. When you think of your recovery time objective, it's how fast am I going to be able to get back up after a disaster? So things you need to consider are, where am I going to replicate to? How often am I going to take a snapshot? The more you replicate or the more snapshots you take, the more money it's going to cost you. So the ability to recover in a very short time frame, the shorter time frame that is, the more it's going to cost you. Your recovery point objective. So if your most recent backup was 8 hours ago, your best recovery point is going to be from 8 hours ago, right? You're going to lose 8 hours worth of data if you're only backing up or snapshotting every 8 hours. So you have high availability versus cost. That's kind of what we were just talking about there. Installing your own database on Amazon Elastic Compute, so EC2, and then integrating with existing development environments and building a scalable architecture.
When you make everything high available,
So the reason you wouldn't make everything high available if it's a development infrastructure or development application where, it's not in production. People are building things, they're doing things for fun, testing out ideas. I mean, really, the reason AWS was ever invented in the first place, right, was for folks like that. Production systems in the cloud 7, 8, 10 years ago was kind of unheard of. Right. So, I think RTO, understanding your recovery time and recovery points has become a lot more important now that companies like Capital One are running their infrastructure in the cloud.
So does AWS now offer a guarantee like Azure, Microsoft Azure, they offer 99.9% uptime?
Yeah.
Hours a year.
Right.
Do they offer
What
the
do,
same kind of?
I don't know. So I've heard that before, but what do you get from a guarantee perspective? What if they don't achieve the 5 nines? What do you get?
You can get them to write it into your contract.
Right. So then you're getting a refund or something. Yeah.
And even more penalties, depending on how big the environment is and how much they want the contract.
Okay, sure. So I don't know if Amazon's does anybody know if Amazon's doing that? Yeah.
11 nines.
From Azure or from Amazon? Okay, so
For S3
S3 is 11 nines?
for your data durability, not availability. They're saying your data is not going to get corrupted up to 11.9, but it'll be available by
So it's basically 8 to 10.
I don't think it's safe as a full, that one drops off, but something like that.
You could architect low-cost, highly available solutions that actually are HA, like an auto-scale group of 1. So if it falls off a fixed plan or that availability zone goes away, it automatically spins as 1 in another availability zone. So you don't have to do full HA because there's costs associated with it and complexity, obviously. So like, I know
are you telling us that's a standard package then? The ability to have another EC2 spin up in the.
Build that.
that's just how
You-
you just set up an auto-scaling group, which is free, and all it does is make sure that one instance is running somewhere.
Gotcha. Yep, that makes sense. So that's a great way to maybe get around it, right? High availability that's managed by AWS, SQS, RDS, S3, HA managed by you. So your virtual private cloud, your Amazon machine image, which is a collection of CPU applications in a predefined image, auto scaling, elastic IP addresses, and we talked about snapshots and replication. So here's a strategy for keeping the dollar amount of your snapshots low. If you look at, there's no deletion strategy there on the left-hand side. So, in your first full snapshot, which is really your first full backup, it's a terabyte. On a monthly basis, I have roughly 900 gigabytes that is changing, okay? So that's, when you're doing a snapshot, you're backing up the changes. So now on month 2, you have close to 2 terabytes. At the end of the 12 months, you're at $7,900. But if you're going with a strategy where your snapshots are deleting on a monthly basis, that cost is now $2,290. Okay. So EC2 Instance Types, your EC2, a virtual machine that consists of CPU, memory, storage, and networking. You have general purpose EC2s, so exactly what it says. You have ones that are designed for high performance, ones that are designed or memory optimized, and then others that are storage optimized. So it's really good to become familiar with all of these EC2 instances. How do you purchase an EC2 instance? Well, there's on-demand instances. On-demand instances is exactly what it sounds. I need some resources. I need them now. I don't know how long I'm going to need them for, but it could be a day. It could be a year. You purchase an on-demand instance. Reserved instances can be purchased at a much lower cost than an on-demand instance, but you need to commit to a time frame. That time frame can either be 1 year or 3 years. Spot instances are where you actually bid for unused EC2 resources. And I believe, does anybody have any ideas on how much you're actually getting off on a spot instance? Up to half, yeah, is that about right? So I guess it all depends on what's going on that day. You know? Yeah, so I'm glad. Okay, but let's talk about regions because regions are important. So you need to know a lot about this. There's going to be questions about designing highly available fault-tolerant systems, and where you place those designs is important. So you have US East, you have a couple different facilities there, US West, and then all around the world. Within the regions, you have availability zones. So your availability zone is your data center. You have multiple data centers within a region, and you spread out your resources amongst those availability zones. What is Amazon Workspaces? That's right. You got the certification, right? Oh, you're preparing for it. Gotcha, gotcha. So yes, it is, the answer is A, you're right. Fully managed desktop computing services in the AWS cloud replaces traditional VDI environments. Okay, I'm glad I don't get to talk about virtual private clouds because I am not an expert when it comes to that. So, solutions architect, the professional level. So as you can see, as of 1 year ago, not even 1 year ago, there were 2,300 of these folks running around. Listen, this is a much tougher certification to achieve. This is what you would do after you achieve associate level solutions architect. Okay, so here's what you need to know for the professional exam. And look at those numbers. Everything is less than 20%. So there's a lot of topics that are covered in the professional exam, and you need to know a little bit about everything here. Associate level developer. We have 8,000, 9,000 of these folks running around as of February of this year. Here's what you need to know for the developer level 1. The associate level. AWS fundamentals, 10%. Designing and developing, makes sense, right? 40%. Deployment and security is 30%, and then debugging is 20%. So very, very much development terms here. For me, more understanding the architecture side of it a lot better. These are some of the courses that we provide, so again, that's stuff you'll be checking out. SysOps administrator, associate level. 6,000 of these people as of January of this year. Here's what you need to know for SysOps. Again, it kind of spans across the board here. This is an associate level certification, but again, look at all you need to know. Monitoring and metrics, high availability, seems to be a common theme across the board, high availability and fault tolerance. Analysis, deployment and provisioning, data management, security, and networking. Just a little more detail on all of the points that we just covered right there. DevOps engineer professional. Yeah.
What's the year on this one?
I couldn't find one with a year. But what I do know is that it's difficult and rare. The content is broad. It's very much sought after, and you won't be unemployed if you have this certification. No, I don't. I really don't. Some of the things that you need, I don't have a traditional study guide for that, but here are some of the topics that will be covered when going after that professional level certification. So as part of the agenda, and one of the things we talked about, the AWS partner requirements. This is a snippet from the AWS partner site. As you can see, it's $2,500 a year just to become part of this program here. And then you can see the different requirements as you go down the board here. At the end of the day, AWS is requiring that you receive accreditation or instructor-led training from them. Probably you're wondering out there, Cloud Academy, A Cloud Guru, other cloud training services. What does Amazon actually do? They provide in-person, on-premise training for their clients. And that's, I think they're always, experimenting with different web-based training tools, but for the most part, what they do is go to large companies, get 30 people in a room, and train the entire team for a week, and it's very, very expensive to do. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time today. That's the end of it.